Hey guys, this is Drew Rice from the Welfare 99 podcast, and today we have a special guest who is going to talk to us about his experience as a rideshare driver so that we can get a better perspective after my recent video on Prop 22. So if you'd like to go ahead and get started, let us know, who you are, where you're from, and just a general intro.
Hey, Drew Ray, man, thanks for having me here. My name's Adam, Germany, just like the country. I live in the Tampa Bay area, in the west coast of Florida. I'm originally from New Orleans, but I've lived all over the country between here and there. And I've been a driver now, an Uber driver for, I think next month will be 6 years total.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nice. So that would be what I was wondering is, so what rideshare companies do you work for? Like, I know that there are different, people work for several at the same time. And if so, what are kind of the differences between them? And do you have any preferences? And yeah, just kind of enlighten us on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I've been a driver for Uber, like I said, for it'll be 6 years, probably in a few days. Lyft, I added just because as independent contractors, we get the dexterity to see what's best and figure it out. And I think I added them a little over 2.5 years ago, something like that. So I definitely have much more experience and I don't know if I call it loyalty, but just preference with Uber, just because time and infrastructure and my preference of the platform. I mean, essentially both products provide the same service. Oftentimes a lot of drivers are doing both. Like me doing both is pretty common of a lot of drivers. But I can say that honestly, 99% of my time is spent on the Uber platform for sure.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Cool. And do you know, like from other drivers, if there's any, competitive advantage between them or like, discernible difference? Because I've heard, so as a layman who is not familiar, I've heard people say that like Lyft gives a higher percentage to employees, but I honestly haven't looked enough into it to know the answer of whether that's
Sure.
true.
So the unique part about the ride share business is that every market is different. Like, so my experience I started driving in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I live in Tampa Bay now. And the rates are different there. In Indianapolis, the rates are a little bit higher. And the way the rates work, just make it pretty simple, is you get paid per mile, per minute. So you're paid for your distance and your time. So I think in Indianapolis, it was probably like 70 cents or 70 something, I think, per mile. And in Tampa Bay area, it's 65 cents per mile. So it's lower in Florida. But the thing I can say about the difference between the two areas is the traffic is much higher in Florida. So, and there's more drivers in Florida. The population in Tampa is more than Indianapolis. Indianapolis Metro has about 2 million people. Tampa has about 3 million people. So
Yeah,
it's all kind of a supply and demand driven thing. So
of
that's
course.
the,
Awesome. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And like those rates, I mean, so I obviously work a very different job, but like when we have
sure.
rates for driving that is outside of our normal commute, then we're looking, I think it's like around 60 cents, something like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's
Hmm.
generally comparable when you're looking at like
Yep.
government rates based on cities. So thank you for that. Appreciate that, because I was also going to ask whether it was what the pay structure was and how that was laid out. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I was wondering, so you said, you've been doing this for a little while, for a while rather, but what other jobs have you had beforehand? And, how would you, I mean, obviously you at least prefer this in your given situation.
Sure.
Why? What were the differences?
So I mean, historically, I did my undergrad in like accounting, and I went to culinary school. So I'm actually a chef also. So I owned a personal chef business for about 5 years when I lived in Indianapolis, and then I moved here, and just how I want my life to look. Like, I really have a goal to retire in the next few years, so it's a little difficult to do from someone's kitchen. So I wanted to do something that would give me the ability to have the flexibility to kind of take care of the other things that are important to me. So I've been in hospitality management and leadership roles for the last 13, 14, 15 years now, actually. And I started driving Uber 6 years ago, part time when I started my business. Like, it was kind of how most people typically drive Uber. They drive it as extra money, a filler, something like that. When I started my company, I only had one client, so you know I couldn't live on that one client how I was structured. So I was like, let me just do some Uber and make $500-600 on the weekend, and that'll supplement until I build my clientele. So I started that way, and then my business took off and minimized what I did. Did it if I was going to go take a vacation or if I wanted some play money or something like that, just some extra income. I'd go drive. If I didn't have anything else to do, might as well make money instead of spend money. Um, and then the last 2 years or so, I kind of transitioned more into. I knew I was coming to Florida, so I kind of transitioned into doing it. Let's see if I can make this work full time. And I could tell that I could when I was doing it part time, just because of those results. I was like, if I just put in the same effort, and Uber and Lyft rideshare is a win and wear game, knowing when to be somewhere and when to be there at the same time, um, or where to be at the same time. So, I mean, that's kind of my work background. I mean,
Gotcha.
I've been in management, leadership, entrepreneur, and to me, rideshare fit right in my wheelhouse because it gave me freedom of my time, which is the most important part. Um,
I agree with you.
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree with you on that. I'm fortunate that my job, like mine, is mostly working with computers, so a lot of what I
yep,
can do is very free form in my schedule and such. Even though
sure,
I'm a W-2, so I'm 100% with you. I agree that flexibility in work life balance is like the number one goal. That's the goal for me financially, is just to be at a point where I don't have financial stress and I'm capable of doing what I want with my time. So
exactly,
I feel you there. And I wanted to get that perspective just because most of my jobs have been like, most of my life actually has been blue collar work, loading trucks. And then, once I finished getting out of school, then I got a job as an engineer. And so, very vast different ends of the spectrum,
for
but
sure.
not the same. And you have definitely run the gamut. That's awesome. What are you, so you said you wanted to retire soon. Like what, around what age are you?
So I'm 36. So I've been planning to retire at 40.
Oh,
Like, and
awesome.
by retire, I don't mean like I want to sit up and get fat and do nothing. I just mean like kind of like you said, like I want the freedom to do what I want, when I want, how I want, and time and money are not a concern. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah.
That's really it. Like
Yeah.
that's all that means to me. And I mean, I think that's honestly that's I have this conversation with passengers often because there is this kind of misconception of what Uber can be, and people ask me like, "Can you really do it? Is it worth it?" And they're like, "I hear from all these drivers, it's not worth it. We're not making anything." I was like, I can't speak for other people in other places, but all I can tell you is this: what we're doing, this ride right now, supports my entire life comfortably. So yeah, that's retirement. Yes, I want freedom to be able to build my life accordingly.
Awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
and that's the same. Anytime people talk about, and congratulations on being even close to that at 40. That's amazing, and that's a testament to being willing to put in the time, because most people are not gonna, you know, be able to get there. Just whether it's their, effort, or how early they're able to start saving, or any of that. That's awesome. Really happy for you.
well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of like my goal. It's like I live in a higher cost of living area, so it's we'll see. But as like yeah, my goal is kind of the same, is like to be at least semi-retired by 40. And then maybe go like, I don't know, coach high school wrestling or something like that, that I would want to do
For
without
sure,
without worrying about the money, you know.
for sure.
So yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, fun fact, like I actually before I moved to Florida, I loved California. Like it was kind of this, it was a choice between the two, honestly. And just the numbers made more sense to me. And I was like, I can go to Florida and live and be zero tax for income and visit California as much as I want. But
You
I love California.
you
I
made the
love
right
California.
choice. Like California is amazing.
Yeah,
It's awesome. I'm beyond blessed to be where I'm at. Like
sure.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
And yeah, when I was even in school, even graduating with an engineering degree, and like having a really good GPA, and being in a position where I could like choose what I wanted to do, which is
hmm,
awesome. Even then, I remember thinking to myself, I was like, "There's no way in hell they're going to give me enough money to come there and like be able to justify the cost of living difference between," because I'm from
sure.
rural North Carolina, so I grew up on an 167-acre tree farm in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
Like I'm not
yeah,
yeah. So no, I don't blame you. My options, Florida wasn't one. Mine were like Huntsville, Alabama, Connecticut, DC, and here. And three of those cost about the same, but don't have the beach or the mountains nearby. And Huntsville is it's good for Alabama, but that's about it.
Not a funny fact. My mom lives in Huntsville. Like I grew
Really?
up a large portion of my life in Huntsville,
It's a
bro. Like
great town.
it is
I,
like it even for it is great for Alabama. Even if you took it out of Alabama and put it somewhere else, it could hold its own. Like
oh yeah,
Huntsville today, not where I grew growing up in that area. I wouldn't say the same, but like Huntsville today in the last decade,
yeah,
especially in your field of engineering, oh, it's a fantastic place.
exactly.
Fantastic.
And if I at the time I'm been date I've in like a good long term relationship with a girl I met out here. But at the
Yep.
time, I I was working full time at UPS while I was in college while doing engineering, so I had no life, and so
Sure.
I was like, I need graduating school. It's like I need to go out, get you know, enjoy life as a 20, because I took some years off, so I was like 24 when I graduated. So it's
Sure.
like I need to, enjoy my life and trying to
Yeah.
find someone that you want to, in Huntsville
Yeah.
is a lot harder than in a place like
It
Los
is.
Angeles where we have like 12 or 14 million people. Like,
It is. That's
but
more than the state of Alabama.
exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the yeah,
Yeah.
Los Angeles County has more people than North Carolina or Alabama individually. It's
Hmm.
insane. And
Hmm.
yeah, there's positives and
Hmm.
negatives of that. But no,
Sure.
I love
Sure.
Huntsville. And if I had been in a situation where I could have like, where I'd want to settle down, and I debated it also because of being able to go and, buy a house in like Madison County, like
Yeah.
almost immediately and
Yep.
start having that setup where you have tenants. I was like, oh, but the beach,
Yeah. I get
and
it. I
such
do.
is life.
I still wrestle this. Like I haven't. It's because my mom is still there. It is definitely a spot of investment for me. Like it's on my map, and the dart is on Huntsville. So I understand.
Yeah, same. One day. And then also they have such good schools like in that area. I was so impressed because, and I know I'm on a tangent here. We'll get to the, but
Yeah, it's all right.
yeah, I was so impressed because so I worked as an intern. I was an intern there for Northrop Grumman, right
Yep.
there near
Yep.
the space center, and
Yep.
it was awesome to me because there were so like there's these the small schools like A&T and then UA University of Alabama at Huntsville UAH.
Hmm.
It's insane like how accessible that is to the all those different industries because where I'm
Hmm.
from like we don't have any of that because the only places we have aerospace, which is what I wanted to do, is on the eastern side of the state, and it's like old military stuff at the Marine base at Cherry Point. And
Sure.
I was like, I'm going and interning with these people, these kids that are like, juniors in college, and they've been
Hmm.
interning already for 3 years at at
Hmm.
either NASA or Northrop or one of them. It's like, and you're talking about that in a place where the cost of living is like
Hmm.
60% of what it is here. That's
Hmm.
like yeah. So
Hmm.
and Florida is a great place too when it comes to cost of living anywhere outside of
Hmm.
Miami. Like
Hmm. This is true, and especially you sprinkle in the you said beach earlier.
right,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got it. Like and
Yeah.
the side of Florida you're on is a little bit better when it comes to the weather patterns each year. Because
100%.
my brother was in Daytona, and so him being on the Atlantic coast, they
Yeah.
kind of he came to visit a lot in the fall, whenever they had big storms. So
Valid.
yeah, but awesome. Well, pretty cool. Small world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
So then, what I wanted to get to was since you mentioned it about you can't speak for other people and for how it works for them and time and place. What I wanted to get was a little bit of an insight of how do you make it work for you? Like, what do you do? What's your plan? How does it fit your lifestyle?
Yeah.
How do you optimize it?
I mean, the beauty.
And also, I'm sorry, I want to
Oh,
lead you as well to how does it, or I'll follow up afterwards on
okay.
how it affects your tax bill because
Hmm.
of the write-offs. Because I know when I
Hmm.
looked at it, that was one thing that I definitely was confused by when I was trying to decide whether or not I even wanted to do it. So,
Sure. Sure. So, I mean, I guess the first part for me of how I go into it is I go into it like this is my business. My car is my business, right? And Uber has different platforms. Uber X is the one that most people use. You know, you have Uber Lux, Uber Black, and those are higher end ones where you have a larger vehicle or a black car style service. And so I'm not doing this on a higher rate. I'm on the lowest rate platform that you can drive on, right? And so I just look at it as a business. You know, I go into it, and every tank of gas is my cost of goods sold. I mean, it's just basic accounting, right? That's my cost of goods sold. And so let's just say for kicks and giggles, if you have a 15-gallon tank, which is an average car size, right? And oops, sorry,
No worries.
and you fill up your gas tank, even in high, uh, even now, gas is over, at least here
Right.
in Florida, is like roughly 250 ish right about now, I think, somewhere in there for basic regular unleaded. So, you know, $33 maybe, somewhere around there. So I usually estimate, you know, the fluctuation between 30 and $40 on a tank of gas, right? And every tank of gas, I expect to make at worst $250 at worst. Like that's a bad, you know, maybe it's slow, maybe something's going on. But on average, I expect to make at least $300. So my cost of goods, just pure gas, right, is 10% roughly, right? Because usually I'm actually getting more like 350 or 400 for a tank of gas. So um, that's where I start. That tank of gas should turn me this, and I'm trying to keep my costs, the most basic costs, fuel, at around 10 to 15% tops, and that's where I start. And then structure wise of when am I driving and where am I driving? Well, every market is different. So like when I was in Indianapolis, Indianapolis is not necessarily a destination. It's a fantastic city, but it is not like a vacation destination. It is a business destination. Like it's the crossroads of America. So there's a lot of, I think it just overtook Vegas as uh, pre COVID, the convention capital of the US because so many conventions. So it was a big business center. So a lot of my business during the week were business people coming in from the airport and moving about throughout the city um, for conventions and that type of thing. And then obviously on the weekend, people like to go out. So my strategy here in Florida, this is a destination. So yes, people are still coming here for business, but people are also coming here because it's Florida and the beach, right? We live. I tell people we live in paradise. Um,
Yep.
yeah, like people work all year to come spend a week here. Is my company line for Florida. So here, as long as you're not out in the rural areas, if you're in, I live in near the beach area, so I live near that area. So I typically would start my day if I were to start in the morning, and I've done it in different times. I've driven early in the morning and I've driven late at night, and there's different strategies. If you're early in the morning, you probably want to start your day near hotels because people are checking out and going to the airport, right? If you're driving midday, which I never suggest for people because where are people going in the middle of the day? But if you want to, I guess you can go sit at the airport. Horrible idea. Don't do that. But if you just want to be out, that's what some people do. For me, if I'm going to drive the evening, which is usually my option, either early morning or evening, I'm getting people that are leaving work, that are heading to the airport from a business travel, or people just traveling for their evening activities, right? And that's Monday through Friday. The weekend, it's the weekend. People are going out. So just be where people are near their homes, right? So it's really not super complicated. It's just think like people live, like think how you live and be those places, honestly.
For sure. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And I can definitely imagine the clientele being very different between Indianapolis and
Oh,
Tampa. Like,
oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, on the weekend, they're similar, but,
of course.
the vibe's a little different because, it's the beach.
Right. No, no, for
Yeah,
sure. No question.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
then as far as so since you're putting in, the basic cost of goods of
Sure,
gas, and you're looking at that at being 10%, then you're looking at the whatever the offset is between the depreciation and the cost of whatever repairs and whatnot, wear and tear on your
sure.
car versus what they give you per mile. Generally speaking, how does that relate? Like, is it more than enough? Is it comparable? What?
So I think the thing that we look at, like if we just look at it from a pure depreciation standpoint, where people are looking at, well, the value of my car is going down. Okay, maybe. And it also depends on what is your intent. So when I say that, I mean, if you're driving your car normally, right, you have all of your expenses and not as much wear and tear for sure, but you're not making any money for that. None. Like if you have a car, you're going to pay car insurance,
Right.
you're going to pay
It's all sunk.
gas. You're all going to pay that, right? What I'm doing at the end of the year, and I'm kind of jumping a little bit to your tax question, all of those things mileage wise are deductions, right? Like all the miles that I've driven are now deductions. And as of last tax year, 55 or 56 and a half cents per mile, right? And um, if you drive full time, you're probably driving at least 1,000 miles a week, roughly,
Okay.
right? Right. Um, maybe, yeah, probably about
Wait,
a
a
thousand to
thousand a
12.
week?
Yeah,
That's a lot. That's like so 52,000 a year.
sure,
Okay,
sure,
gotcha. I just want to make sure I was clear.
sure. Yeah, yeah, no, no, sure. Again, going back to this is not a hobby, right? This is a
Right.
business.
No question. Yeah.
So, so that's just my cost of goods sold. And I have a 2015 car, right? So it's not brand new, but it's definitely in the wheelhouse of solid years, solid good, right? So, um, if you take care of your car, it'll take care of you, right?
Of
Like
course.
cars can go 200. I've seen Uber drivers in cars with 300,000 miles in their car. I'm rolling close to 200, and we're still just people get in my car and like, what year is this? I'm like 15. Really? Like it just if you take care of it, it'll take care of you. And again, it all goes back to this is a business. So, I may put those that many miles in my car, but that 56 cents per mile. And let's say I only did 1,000 miles a week. That's 52,000 miles. And I'm not an accountant or a tax professional, but I'm just giving you guys simple math, right?
Right.
56 cents at 52,000 miles, over $25,000 worth of deduction by itself, right?
Makes sense.
Um, so depreciation, again, who buys their car for a business, right? Like I'm not saying I didn't buy my car for Uber, but I started making sense of it, I'm like, if you buy your car and you realize, okay, this is a business, I'm going to keep it until I can't, right? Like I'm going to drive it and take care of it and maintain it, right? And if you're looking, so here's one thing I would suggest, and there's some YouTubers actually who are rideshare drivers who give you some of their information and how they've done it. A lot of people will take it, drive their car to a certain place, mileage wise, and then trade it in and start the process over, right? Because they're doing it as a business. They want to still get value out of their car before they get to a higher mileage place. It's not what I've done, but that's what some people do. Um, so I mean, for me, just the mileage alone,
Yeah. No,
phenomenal deduction,
that is definitely
right?
yeah. So then that was a so this could be something that's off base. So like I have a general idea of a lot of the different deductions that people use. And so
Sure.
one that I was wondering with if you were going to do a ride share, because I was thinking about doing this, but not doing ride share, but doing it through Turo. But the same type of
Okay.
logic of going and buying
Yeah.
a car that's at the very low end of its depreciation curve, or
Hmm.
one where I'm able to write off the depreciation each year as a
Sure.
way to offset it.
Sure.
And what I was wondering is like you said you didn't buy yours for Uber, but if you were to, uh, how would that work as far as normally when you have a business that's an S corp or an LLC, you would just be able to deduct 20% each year for the 5 years on that car. How does that play in when you're doing it through a third party as opposed to your own independent business?
So I mean, because we're all 1099, right? You can operate as an LLC or you can operate as uh, an individual. But even as an LLC, right, it's still a pass through. Like you're still taxed the same way you are as an individual tax purposes. The LLC is just providing you with that level of
Not getting sued.
liability protection,
Right.
right? Like liability protection, limited liability, right?
Right.
So you have the benefit of being able to make deductions. And again, of course, I'm not an accountant. I
Right.
don't
Right.
claim to
Right.
be a tax professional, but like you're able to deduct costs, right? And but depreciation isn't one that I've had to cross that bridge yet. So I can't speak knowledgeably to that.
Of course. No worries.
All I can speak to is what I'm able to do in the moments I'm in now. Like depreciation is something that I've even considered at this point because I'm able to take my mileage as such a significant write off that it's fantastic,
You've
right?
already moved the bar so low on your that it's
One
worth it
hundred
anyway.
percent,
Gotcha.
100%.
Gotcha. Yeah, and anyone listening, yeah, neither of us are tax professionals, so definitely talk to one. But and I highly suggest to anyone listening that you call, like, look up online, just like CPAs near me. You, they are amazing because that's what I've done to try and learn a lot of different things about tax code when I'm looking into these types of opportunities. Is I'll
Mm-hmm.
call, sit down, and just have a phone conversation. And as long as you have, don't waste their time. As long as you have
Yeah.
specific questions,
Yep.
it's amazing how much of a wealth of knowledge they are.
100%.
Yeah, and on that, since might as well do this tangent since you said you went to school for accounting.
Yep.
Yeah, do you talk to an like if you're willing, if you're fair to share this, is
Sure.
like, do you do this through a some incorporation or or do you speak to a CPA regularly?
No,
Okay,
I
no
mean,
need.
because the point in and it's not because I have a background in accounting, like literally, like I think a lot of times things seem complicated, right? Because like everything is complicated until it's not, right? And we have reached the point where everything that you need to know is probably on the same platform that people are watching this video.
Yep,
Like you
100%
can
agree.
find whatever you need to know on the platform or the device that you're using. You can find it. So in being a businessman and trying to be efficient with my resources, like if I have a question, I'll look. If I can't find it, I know people, so I'll go ask questions. But that doesn't happen very often because if you're willing to do the work, just like anything, you can find the answers. So I don't use it. I actually file my taxes on TurboTax, which also honestly is a benefit of Uber. I don't pay a fee, but especially this year because I don't have for Florida. I won't have to file a Florida state income tax. So as a driver, one of my benefits is I have free filing with TurboTax, and the system is so user friendly at this point.
Yeah,
Just answer the questions,
yeah.
and you'll.
I always use TurboTax as well. It's the best one that I've found. Like
I
for a
agree.
normal, for
Yeah,
99% of people.
and that's what this channel is about, right? Like for the 99.
Exactly. That is
Yeah,
exactly what it's about. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. So, thank you. I really appreciate that because that's it's important to have an idea of like a plan in
hmm
mind. Because I know when I was
hmm
looking at it, and I was looking at something like, and keep in mind, I'm looking at this from a completely different perspective than you are because
sure,
you're looking at this as I want this to be my job. Whereas I was looking at it from the perspective of, is this a way where I could make some extra money on the side?
sure,
And I agree that when I looked at the numbers for me, it didn't make any sense. But
sure.
but for someone like you, especially in your area, sounds like a pretty great deal. And I remember looking specifically at Turo because Turo is really popular out here.
I've seen you.
Because people take vacations to Vegas or LA, especially, and they
hmm
want to rent a convertible or some type
hmm
of luxury car that you can't get at a rental place. And it's
hmm
like, as an example, like a Honda S2000.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for other people that aren't aware, an S2000 is it's a two-seat convertible by Honda, and basically there's only like 1,700 of them in the United States. But it's got like more horsepower than a Miata, but it's about the same size. So it's really fun. It only comes in a stick. And what's awesome about it is because it's a four-cylinder, it has a lower insurance cost than a lot of sports cars because generally speaking, it's by the cylinder that those rates go up. So like a V6 Mustang, which is like the weakest Mustang, is going to get outperformed by an S2000 with four-cylinder, but it's going to have lower insurance on it, which makes the cost very low. Then when you consider that it had only like 1,700 in the U.S., that means that its depreciation curve is basically at the bottom, so it's not losing any more value because of scarcity.
hmm
Then you add on that it's a convertible, mostly in bright colors. The most common is yellow. Um, yeah, it's a really common one for people to rent. And then on top of that, when you're looking in like the Los Angeles market, they were charging everyone that has one is charging like $200 to $240 a day on this thing. This is a car that you can buy for about $17,000. And again, this has dropped. It was sold for like 34 10 years ago.
Right.
it's not dropping it. So I was looking at
Yeah.
that as like, I could do that and just write off these depreciations and then on top of that get just a little bit more and it would easily match it. But then I was like, add in the liability and the time. It's like, but that's just me trying to scam the system.
Sure, sure. I mean, it's all a game, man. Like money and it's all the system is just a game, and I don't mean that in like a pessimistic way. It's just the reality, and a lot of times we don't know the rules to the game, and once we find out the rules, we're like, is that legal?
Right.
Well, they said it is. I guess we better play the game. And if even though if we disagree with it, it's like let's we got to play the game. So then maybe we can make a change to the rules that we don't agree with, right?
Amen. Exactly.
You
That
know.
is, and that is the deal. Is like I know there's some people that that watch this channel that
Hmm.
don't even like the system that we have
Hmm.
currently, and I don't
Hmm.
blame them. But at the same
Sure.
time, I the reality is that we have to first make sure that we're okay and that we
Hmm.
are working towards making our best life so that we have our basic needs met and then we
One
can
hundred
worry
percent.
about those higher level needs of okay, now let's work on fixing the system. And yeah, 100% agreed. Awesome. Okay, so the next one I wanted to ask was, so I know with I know Florida hasn't had as much of a lockdown as a lot of other places in the U.S., but
Sure.
what I was wondering, I know I've ordered a lot of food to go, so I've used Uber Eats and Grubhub and stuff like that since the pandemic. But I was wondering, from your perspective, what has it been like? What is how has business been? What are what's your perspective on it?
Sure. So just like I mean, Florida didn't have, so Florida opened before most places, right? But we did have a period of time where it was closed, where probably mid March until May ish. I mean, it was nothing. Like I didn't drive honestly from Marchish to mid Marchish to about May, just because I mean no one's going anywhere, right? We all had the same situation, right? Where and that happened whether you had a job in a lot of situations or if you're an independent contractor, like movement wasn't happening. The economy was pretty much shut down. So I mean it was challenging, but I knew it would come back right around May once Florida opened back up, and we won't get too deep into all of that. But once it opened the first time, like the bars and all that, there was a lot of drivers. The majority of Uber drivers, statistically, are part time. So, which means they probably have a full time job or some other job. And they would and could file for unemployment. I could have, I just didn't want to because I knew once it opened, I think, I think max you would have got like $600 in Florida or something like that. For me, that's a weekend. So like that's a Saturday and Sunday. So I was like, I'm not going to give up, sit around and do nothing for $600 when I could just work and make the money that I needed. So once things opened back up around Mayish, obviously the volume was not the same, but I spoke about the unemployment and people collecting unemployment part-time drivers because there weren't that many drivers. So the demand was still higher than the amount of drivers that existed. So like I would pick up people and they'd be like, man, I had to wait 20 minutes for them to just find a driver because most drivers were still kind of hesitant. And you can, as a driver, you can look at the airport and look at the queue and see how many people are there and kind of get a feel about how many drivers are back on the road. And I could tell many drivers were not back on the road yet. So once we opened back up, supply and demand was still healthy because of the lack of drivers and a relative amount of demand. And then as we got to June, July, August, it started to level off. And now we're back to drivers probably about the same, but the demand is even higher because people have been cooped up for a bit.
And Florida's one
So,
of the only places that they can come to and do whatever they want.
and that is a thing. Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of people that I pick up, if I pick people up from the airport, even like early in May, I remember I picked people up from Illinois, uh, I don't know, California, Jersey, all over the country coming down because we were open, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent. We
Right.
were.
It just is what it is.
and,
Agreed.
and, and that helped the demand. So, I mean, again, there was probably about a 6 to 8 week precarious time, you know, but I was able to kind of weather that and then just get back to it.
Yeah, I can only imagine because I know I thought about it from the perspective like yours is a very much customer facing business,
Yeah.
whereas I know for me, my main thought was having worked at UPS for the majority of my career, loading trucks. With them having so much more volume and you have everyone together in an open warehouse, it's like, oh man, I can only
Yeah.
imagine, what it was
Yeah.
like during that March to April timeframe for customer facing, much less, a normal warehouse job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad it worked out that way for you where, you know, the supply and demand went to your favor since you were ready to go for it. Yeah,
It was just making, and again, like I, it was just a decision of I could sit and do nothing and hope for the best, or I could take the risk and go, and I think there were enough precautions of like masks being required, which helped for drivers and passengers. Uber mandating that on both sides of the spectrum of riders and passengers, so that really helped make me feel better about the
for
decision
sure.
I was making.
For
You know,
sure. Yeah, no, I can imagine that.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
big deal. Yeah,
yeah,
and yeah, very much. Yeah, no, I have so two of my family members work in the airport slash airline business, and so
mhm,
yeah, both of them, it's like same type of thing. Having so much of a customer facing business during that
sure,
time, and it's like, oh, what is whether you're afraid of catching it or
hmm,
the fact of just the steep drop in consumer behavior, it's
yeah,
like, what is going on here? And then the government wasn't really doing much of anything to help people. I mean, yes, the unemployment checks for sure was a good thing that for the people that needed it, but
sure,
only sending out one stimulus check isn't going to do a whole lot for people that are trying to save money. That's
sure,
yeah,
for sure.
no, that's glad that worked out. Okay, so then the other one I was wondering is, so like, were there extra benefits that they offered during this time period? Like, I know that there have been talks of hazard pay, like an increased rate or different bonuses. Mostly, I've heard this at places like, just so everyone's understanding what I'm talking about. Mostly, I've heard this of places at like Target where they're making, generally speaking, less than you are to begin with. So everyone keep that in mind. But
So there was in the sense of covering if say you contracted COVID and you needed to be quarantined early on in the pandemic, that was an offering where they would figure out how much you earned, and don't quote me on it because I never used it. I didn't need to use it, but they offered the ability to cover your income for a time frame if you actually contracted COVID, and that's what kept you from being able to work. So there were definitely some options there. I mean,
awesome.
obviously, because it's a supply and demand driven business, if there's no demand, you can't really just pay people from nothing, right? So, but if you did contract COVID, there was some type of a little bit of a buffer there to kind of help.
Awesome. Yeah, that is better than nothing for sure. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's a very good thing to have in your back pocket just in case. Um,
sure,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. And then so just so every for this last one, and then we'll probably have a little bit more of a conversation after this. But this is the last planned question that we have.
sure,
Just so everyone has a little bit of a background. The reason I have Adam on is because I did a video on California Prop 22, which is a bill that has been proposed by a lot of the rideshare companies. And it has to do with trying to get protections so that they don't have to follow Assembly Bill 5, which there was a lot of controversy around, and that had to do with their ability to label their employees as independent contractors versus employees, so they're workers. My mistake. And basically, we had a little bit of a back and forth because he was, forward enough to leave a comment that was very well thought out, very like polite, and just it was very obvious that it was in good faith. And he was saying, I see where you're coming from, but I have a different perspective on this, and I want to share that with you. And so then I said to him, it's like, hey, come on, because I need that perspective. I don't have it, and that's the whole point. Is I want people, and so if you're
sure,
someone that has the same issue, whether any type of job, if you have a specific viewpoint that I don't have, I would love to have you on because that's the goal: is us to talk and share ideas as workers, so that we're able to have a better understanding of what everyone's going through, and consider that when we go to understand different policies and things in the world around us. And so what I wanted to then ask Adam was, what is your view of Prop 22? And then we'll have a little bit of a back and forth.
Sure. So I mean, from being a non-Californian, seeing it, my understanding is the proposition is obviously in response to AB5, right?
Correct.
To classify drivers as or independent contractors across the spectrum of work, right?
Correct.
As employees of said whatever company, right? And they have to pass the three-pronged test of whether they're an employee or not.
And I'm going to
And that
put that up
part
on the screen for everyone so they can see it. Continue.
and that piece, I don't really have a lot to say about that part, just because I mean I can't really argue with the test that you want to put forth. I think the part that I speak to is whether you were to do it part time or full time. Have it with this type of work, having control of your time is the most valuable piece. So anything that removes that ability, which I don't know many employees who have complete control of their time, like other than they may think they do, but like their boss or someone had to agree that that schedule that they want is okay. For me, losing that hurts more drivers than anything, because to structure that to 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 make someone an employee versus an independent contractor, that by itself just ruins it all. And so I guess that's my perspective, not knowing all the details and inner workings of
For sure.
California. But just from an outside looking in, I'm like, me giving up my time. And I think that's just because that's my life philosophy at this point. Give me control of my time. I can control my outcomes. So giving up my time, I'm not willing to do that. So I think that's what caused me to respond
Oh, for
and
sure.
give feedback for sure.
Yeah, and I want to just so everyone's clear, Assembly Bill 5. Essentially, what ended up happening is that they made a three-prong test. Is the change that they made, and basically, it was intentionally made to target these companies, these rideshare companies, because there's uproar that they haven't been paying enough in taxes. Because essentially, the main difference the government has in what their incentive is for going after this is that these companies, because they have they're independent contractors, not employees, they don't pay the Social Security. They don't pay the Social Security disability insurance, and they don't pay the unemployment insurance. That's the issue. And so the government is looking at this as, okay, well, if we can get them to pay that insurance, then that ends up giving more funds for people that are unemployed, which will help the unemployment problem specifically in California.
Sure.
I don't think that Assembly Bill 5 was good to begin with. I think that it's not a good enough test. I'm not offering a prescription for it either. But I think that it ended up being a real problem. And that's why you saw a lot of other independent contractors that aren't ride shares, like artists, videographers, and so on, have pushed back on it. And they've already put in different restrictions on who it is going after. And so it's a patchwork bill. It's a band aid to try and fix a problem that isn't really effective. That being said, especially talking to Adam, I agree that I don't think that Assembly Bill 5 is good. I think that, yes, there needs to be something done to fix that problem, because it does end up hurting drivers in the current market. However, I still think that the issue with the Prop 22, and the reason I would still personally vote no on it, is the specific people that wrote it and the stipulations that they put in it. And what I mean is that the first thing is the stipulation that they put that to me is just over the top, that I didn't hammer enough in my first video, is that to repeal this, if it passes, they need a 7/8 majority across the entire California legislature in order to repeal it, which is unheard of. And in my opinion, that is a little bit too much. I think that in a perfect world, if I had to paint it, in a perfect world, I would not want my boss writing the law that I have to follow, just because I kind of want a little bit of a third party involved to make sure that we're all good. And so in a perfect world, what I would love to see is, rideshare employees get a seat at the table, and and I say employees not as a slight of employee versus independent contractor. So I'm going to say workers from here on out. Rideshare workers, just so we're not confused. I would like to see rideshare workers have a say in like what are the terms of this, because I have seen that, I think it's like 80% of rideshare employees are okay with Prop 22 in the state of California. I think the issue is the balance of power, and I think also just, and this could just be me being a prick, but just on principle, the fact that they've spent more money on this bill to try and pass it than any other bill in the state of California's history, that looks really bad. And I don't think we should, I mean, generally speaking, I think that money in politics, everyone kind of agrees that that's a problem. And
Sure.
we shouldn't reward them for that. That being said, Assembly Bill 5 definitely needs a lot of work fixed on it because it does screw over a lot of people. No question.
Sure.
Yeah. No, and I don't have a full answer. I mean, what I would like to say, but this could just be me living in fantasy land. So, what I would like to say is that, if you're getting paid, by the mile and, by, the time, then technically speaking, if they were a, good company, and they wanted to do the best by you and not worry about their interest as much, then they would, wouldn't have a problem with you making your own hours still. But I think, yes, you and I both know that pragmatically that will not
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dicey situation. Yeah, and the main problem I have with it is when you look. I think it's great for people to be able to do have their time, which is really valuable.
Sure.
The big problem is, and this is coming from a UPS employee back in I worked at UPS for about 5 years,
Mhm.
and I'm 27, so most of my working career was there.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
And I know that when you look as an example at like FedEx versus UPS versus Amazon Flex being independent contractors, FedEx being a non-unionized version, and UPS being a very heavily unionized company, the value that you're able to get for your labor between those three is stark. When you're talking about UPS, like essentially, if I was loading trucks, right, in college, I was able to make around $30,000 a year. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, that's pretty great for no degree.
For a college student.
And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And granted, I was working full time. Don't get me wrong, but and then when you look at driver's pay, like the driver, I think the median driver pay for UPS is like 60,000 a year, and that's without a college degree and without a CDL, so no special licensing. And then on top of that, you have better benefits than my dad in the Marine Corps had. It's insane. That being said, I understand that not every job is going to be the same. But when you look at the comparison and you see FedEx, where the average driver makes between 30 and 40,000 per year, and then Amazon Flex, which is the independent contractor version, even less than that, and they aren't allowed to unionize, I am seeing that as the common business practice across industries, rideshare included, where companies see, okay, if we can push independent contractors more and more, then we're able to essentially alienate employees and keep them from unionizing, which it'll help some people. Don't get me wrong. It'll help some
Mhm.
people because some people are going to be smarter and able to play the system and able to make it work for them, like you've been doing, which is amazing. And I applaud you. The issue you have is that is going to lower the wages across the industry because, like, if say in the example of Amazon and UPS, currently Amazon heavily relies on UPS and the USPS for their shipping because they don't have the infrastructure to do all of the logistics work.
Mhm.
But if they were able to get to a point where they didn't need those third parties, then they would end up having a much stronger monopoly on that section of the market. And of course, that will then lower wages because they have more of the business in that area, which if they're running on lower costs than UPS is for doing the same thing, then they're going to be pushing UPS out of business. And that is going to essentially end up eroding either benefits, pay, employment at that company that then can't compete. And so the problem is that when the government doesn't do something to make it an even playing field as far as how companies are able to compete, then you have, there's going to be some inequality in the market that's unfair as far as like who's playing
Sure,
by the rules because they're playing by different rules.
sure.
That's the main problem. So I'll let you talk in 1 second. I apologize.
No,
I've
you're
gone
okay.
very long.
You're okay.
But yeah, so that's why I think, generally speaking, that I still think that no on 22 makes the most sense, but I do think we need to do a serious discussion about Assembly Bill 5 and look at how to make it better because, yeah, it is going to hose a lot of independent contractors in the short term. No question.
I guess I wonder, like I, in politics is politics,
Right,
and
right.
I feel like
We all have biases.
most of this is like, most of this is driven by that, right? Like all of this is being pushed by politics. Don't get me wrong. Is Uber or Lyft and rideshare and independent contract work in this particular industry perfect? By no means, no. However, the I guess I have a question. My question would be, I don't really know about the Amazon Flex
No, of course.
model.
I was just wanting to
Uh,
give I'm ignorant outside of talking to you and other, anecdotal experiences. So that's just
sure,
here's my reasoning for having this skepticism.
sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, are Amazon Flex, are most of their drivers full time, part time? Since they're independent contractors, do they get to make their schedules as well, or how does that work?
I'm not sure. So they do get to make their schedules. I'm not sure about whether most are full time or part time. They do make their schedules though. And
Because
basically,
that's
they get paid more. So we had a lot of people that would leave UPS
hmm
loading jobs to go get Amazon Flex jobs because
hmm
they would make more driving there than they would loading, and because UPS it's a lot harder to get those driver jobs because they're amazing jobs and nobody leaves
sure,
them until they retire. So
sure.
the difference in pay would be, say you'd make 13 or something like that loading, then you could go there and make like 16, and so it was worth it for their time. But I don't know as far as like how many are full and how many are part.
So that's kind of the thing. Even if we just look at the rideshare business, right? When we use numbers and I look at the studies and averages, those numbers are only so good, right? Because an average is just taking a big swath and dividing it by the number of people, right? Like that
Agreed.
are in that swath. So I mean, it doesn't truly reflect what's happening because in that average, if you have full time people who are actually doing it, right? Like if somebody's driving this full time, and I go back to your independent contractor, so you make your own schedule, right? If you're driving this and relying on this for your full time income, if it's not enough money, go do something else. Like
I agree.
it is it's one of those things where it's like staying in it because I, I don't know, like staying in it for what reason? If it doesn't meet your financial needs, why are you doing it, right?
I 100% agree with you. Yes.
And I think if you talk to most drivers who do it full time, the reason they still do it is because it it meets their financial needs. Like at the end of the day, we ask anyone, why do you work? Yes, you might enjoy what you do. You might be passionate about it. Unless you're already independently wealthy, if I asked you, if I stopped paying you, would you still do it? You would probably say no, because I can't.
Right.
Right.
Maslow's
So
hierarchy. Yep.
we're all working because we want to receive um, compensation for our skills, our talents, our work. So if the people who are driving, specifically full time or even part time, if it doesn't make sense to you, why are you doing it? Right. So like force Uber has employees, right? Like they have, I don't know, 15, 20,000. Don't quote me on that number. Tens of thousands of employees around the world, right? And that's in their back of the house handling the infrastructure business. Don't get me wrong, without drivers, you couldn't do any of this. I get it. However, how we're able to control our time and we have the tools we need to be successful, um, the even if they were to switch it, right? If they were to switch and make all drivers employees for the sake of being able to get benefits and all those things that matter, what does it really do? Like, because it will hurt drivers' pay more than time and pay more than anything else. Because a bad day for me, a really bad day for me, and I don't drive for an hourly rate. I drive for, let me drive to reach my goals. But a bad day for me is $20 an hour. So unless we're about to enact a $20 an hour minimum wage, which I would not want, because that is a horrible day, trading that for I don't some other benefit financially just doesn't make any sense for the average driver. You know what I mean? Even when you back out costs and expenses, a bad day you're still looking at 17 on a really bad day. On an average day, you're looking at more like 28, 30,
Yeah.
backing out expenses, 25.
Which at that
So
at that rate, that's amazing. That's awesome.
so so I mean, like, I went to go look so I could have exact numbers of just taking a snapshot of 5 weeks, just and the average, just for people who work on hourly rate and that kind of thing, 29.93. So we can back out, and in none of those weeks did I work 40 hours. On average, I worked 34 hours. So even if you back out expenses, depreciation isn't a consideration for me because I'm writing all of that off in my taxes, my mileage. So go find a job where you can, in the U.S., any city, any state, where you can control your time and after expenses and gas, make $25 an hour. I don't know that it exists. You know what I mean? So jeopardizing
Oh, I
that
I
for,
100% agree with you. Yeah.
like, jeopardizing that for, I don't know what is worth jeopardizing that. Like, just pure numbers wise, I don't know anything that's worth that, because even if I'm not sure what the people say they want benefits or paid days off, or I don't know, like, all of those things you can create. Like, I can get insurance through Uber if I wanted. I can go straight through a partner we have and get insurance, just like anyone at their job who offers insurance can do. I
Right.
can do that.
Right. You know.
Um,
Yeah, and I was
yeah,
wondering because I've heard people talk about that mostly in California. So not I'm sure the prices are completely different, but
sure.
assuming that you know the answer to this, if you do get insurance through Uber, like how is it? Like deduct. What are we looking at? Like payment, deductible, things like that, or who is it through?
So they partner with a company called Stride.
Okay.
So I personally, this is a whole nother philosophical conversation, but I personally believe in, like, insuring myself. Like, I'm a relatively young guy, right? In the grand scheme of my life and living, relatively healthy, right? So I try to put money away to cover expenses, right? Because to me, paying $600, $500, $400 a month to, if I'm healthy, use it 4 times a year and might spend $600
Right.
is just horrible math. So I'm like, why don't I just take that same $600 if I'm really itching to spend $600 on insurance, put it in a bank account, and that is my spending, my health plan, right? So it's available. It always depends on, how much you made the year before, and it's not any different than, like, marketplace insurance, right? It's probably a little more
Gotcha.
expensive than, like, your large companies that have 70, 80, 100,000 employees. So they
Right, because
have
it's a bigger
their
pool. It's more
it's a bigger
subsidized. I
pool,
get it.
but outside, like, it's not much different than your marketplace. Like, it literally is not. So I don't know what benefit really would be given to a driver. You know what I mean? Like, even though I get that Uber's thrown so much money at this, right? Like, even from if we're just being practical about, let's say it passes, and or Prop 22 is AB5 goes into effect and Prop 22 does not pass,
Right.
and they have to turn everybody in California to employees. That will take so long, so long,
Oh, it'll be a
because
nightmare.
I mean, I can't remember if it's 70,000 drivers. So I don't know the number. If we can Google and find out, and maybe you can throw it up there later. But, like, how
Definitely.
many drivers there are in California? You even if it was 10,000 drivers, I know that's not the number. Try firing 10,000 people or reclassifying them as an employee, and then having them all fill out the paperwork, even if we did it digitally, and then building scheduling around the dynamic idea of people requesting rides as they need them.
Oh no, for
If
sure.
If I were the business owner trying to do that, I want no parts of that. Like that is mind-boggling. And again, for what benefit? Like even if it's lip service and they're saying they want to help the driver, what would you be helping the driver do by doing that? Like giving them access to insurance they already have access to, giving them PTO. I said this in my comment on your first video. People are concerned about having paid time off. I think that's just a social construct we've been given of, oh, I want to be paid for my time off. How do I pay for my time off? Because I have control of my time. If I know I'm gonna take a week off, I just go hard 1 week and I make 2 weeks worth in a week. It's possible. And then I take the next week off. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the numbers, right?
Right.
Like, so I'm about to be off next week anyway. So just go hard this week. I have 12 hours in a day that I can work like through without having to take some time off. Because that's how it's built. You have 12 hours in a day to drive without taking and then you have to take a 6-hour break before you can log on again. So every day I have 12 hours. If I really want that much time off, I just schedule my time that way. And honestly, just schedule your finances that way, right? Like
Oh, of course.
just I think that is the bigger, kind of like you said earlier about putting a band-aid on like a cancerous disease. Basically, it feels like trying to, the root cause here is like us not really as a society not understanding how finances work or how to plan with our money, and for me, another reason I wouldn't want to do it, going back to finances, is it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. And for me to keep the same amount of money that I do driving Uber, I would probably have to get a job that pays about 100, minimum $90,000 a year, minimum after taxes for it to match. Because as a W-2 employee, I can't write off the same things I can as a 1099 independent contractor. So I don't know many $90,000 a year jobs where you can make your own schedule 100%.
Oh, 100, yeah, 100% agreed. So, just as a general question, so just so everyone's clear, first of all, to answer your question about California drivers, Uber apparently has 200,000 in the state of California. So, yeah, even more of a nightmare than you were thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also, so everyone's clear, the average wages per hour driver for a ride share right now is about $12 per hour, whereas the average for a traditional taxi is about $30 per hour. So when he's talking about how much he's making, what you're making basically what a traditional taxi driver would make, which is great. So that's pretty awesome. Just so that everyone has like a general idea of, when we're talking about this. And if you live in a more expensive place like California, like I do, keep in mind that these numbers that he's talking about are really, really good pays for those areas, because I know growing up for me as an example, we're working like I was making about $18 per hour when I was working at UPS. And with that, paying for my housing, paying for my food, my car, everything, in the time that I was in school, I saved like $40,000, so this is really good. He's doing a great job. Just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
I think so. Again, a thing to think about with going back to those numbers, when they give you that average per hour, there's a couple things to think about. The drivers that are doing this, again, there's a swath of full time and part time, and they're just taking the aggregate of all the number hours driven, right?
Of course.
Or the income earned or the revenue paid and divided by all the hours driven. But the two things to think about that is, one, there's a large population of drivers, and this gets into like more the dynamics of being a successful driver, which this conversation isn't about per se. We'll just go sit at the airport, and
Right.
you will rack up hours doing nothing, right? Like literally, I was at the airport maybe a week or two ago, and I dropped someone off, and I was in queue because it was high. I only go to the airport when it's busy. I had a guy literally pull up and was like, "Hey man, it's my first time driving in like months. Like, is it even worth it?" He's like, "I've been driving for like an hour and a half and I only made $6." I'm like, uh, first of all, yes, it's worth it. And I had to ask him, where were you? And where he told me he's coming from, well, of course you made $6. You were over in suburbia or like rural land, and then you're going to come sit here now at the airport. Granted, it was a busy time, but you're going to sit here. I wouldn't be sitting here if I had only made $6, right? Like, but I could also tell he didn't know when and where to be. And that's all this game is knowing when to be and where to be at the same time.
For sure.
So like that number of $12 an hour is really misleading,
Of
because I
course. Of
think
course.
if you were to talk to who would put the wear and tear, even if you're doing it part time, right?
I don't
Who would
know.
put wear? That's what I'm saying.
I
Who would put
agree.
wear and tear on their car for $12 an hour?
I
Like really,
agree.
like who would do it? Like I'm sure maybe a small population of people would do it just because, but anyone who's remotely financially astute would not do that,
Right.
right?
Oh,
Because
100%.
you can go get a warehouse job and make
That's
fifteen
just
dollars
what,
an hour,
yep, that was my plan.
right? So the idea, like nothing about this really makes sense to me, because, and going back to the beginning of our conversation when we talked about the game and how it's being played and understanding the rules, politics and money should definitely be separate. Got it.
Right.
They're not. They're not.
Of course not. And they're not
They're
gonna
not.
be. In our system, in
And
our current system, it's impossible. We can
yeah,
only band-aid it so much.
and the reality is, even if I was in Uber's shoes and I was the CEO, and I like to believe, like when I owned my personal chef business, I had employees. No matter what you were doing for me, I paid you $20 an hour minimum. So like, because I understood like
Hell
livable
yeah.
wage, like no matter what you were doing, I don't care what event we were doing, wedding, an event, doesn't matter what it was. I was paying you at least $20 an hour, because livable wage. And at least I can try to do my part, right?
100% agreed.
And with that being said, if I were in the CEO of Uber shoes, I would be doing the same thing, because I know the game that is being played right now is, if this plays out the way that AB5 is going, I'm going to lose. I think we had this conversation that we will lose California, which is your biggest economy,
Right.
like like one of the largest world economies,
Right. And
right?
that's and the counter, which is my my position was there's no way they'll leave. Like they'll figure out a
Sure,
way. And
sure,
yes, it will most likely end up there will be some loss of jobs
hmm
within those companies specifically.
hmm
Where those people go to work, who knows? Whether they are able to get their jobs or they end up being unemployed, which of course creates an even another problem. Um, but yeah, historically, the companies always threaten this. When California put in the higher emission standards for cars, they
sure,
threatened the same thing. California is the best state in the nation for car purchases.
sure,
The reality is California is the number fifth largest economy in the world
yeah,
compared with countries.
yeah,
That's
yep,
like so.
yeah,
Now, yes, there will definitely be collateral damage, no question, and that sucks, and that's a real problem. And that also comes to the issue of California not having reasonable housing prices that ends up making unemployment such a big, like, life-threatening situation for people
sure,
in California. But that's a
sure.
completely different issue. Like,
It is. I mean, but I think I think the whole conversation, like, obviously we don't have years to talk about this, right? But
right.
like, we do somewhat of a disservice by not at least including those parts of the, like, California's cost of living, one, is a part that is huge in the whole equation, right? Because even if you're making $25 an hour in California,
You're
that's
scraping by.
still
You're
there's
not going to buy
still
it.
yeah.
You're not going to buy a house until you retire. Like that, you would
So
take you that long to save up.
like that by itself is an issue, right? But we can't fix that problem. We can't. That's not what this is about. Like the Prop 22 and AB5. That's not what this is about.
Right.
But when I think about it, again, going back to, if I were in their shoes, I would do the same thing. I would throw money at it, because I know this is how the game is played right now. And so, in order for me to win this game, I better play by how the rules are written now.
Oh, I
And
agree. I
and if I
Yeah, while I don't personally agree, with
sure,
people like Bezos as an example, um,
sure,
or like let's just throw a boogeyman out there of like the Koch brothers, right? I don't personally think that they are
yeah,
people that I would want to hang out with, but I don't think that they are inherently evil people because of the
sure,
fact that they are using lobbying money.
yep,
That's just the way the system is, and I think it's the responsive in football. I don't get mad at a person for cheating. I get mad at the ref for not calling it. it's the role of
Sure.
the government and the system to make sure that those problems are fixed. But the reality is, if we have incentives in society right now, people are going to respond to them. And yeah,
Mhm.
I 100% agree.
And using the football analogy, right? Like in this situation, they're not cheating. Like
Right. Which is the
it is,
problem. But yes,
and
like,
they're not cheating. They're playing the game literally by the law, right? That's why they have, swaths and huge teams of legal attorneys to cover themselves while they do it. And I guess I see the morality, I guess, behind this, the morality argument of, you know, let's keep money out of politics. Let's just be pure about it. Let's let's be real about where we are,
oh, I
and
agree.
let's
I agree.
and
You
and
can't
I'm
you can't keep money out of politics in a capitalist based system. It is not possible. Inherently, in especially in a capitalist based system, the people with more money are going to have more power, and they are going to be able to use that power, whether it's economic or political. It's just
because
reality.
at the end of the day, it's not even about money. It's just influence, right? And money just
Right.
happens to be the currency of influence.
Correct.
And
In today, yes. In
yeah, and
feudalism,
today,
it was divine
like
right, but it's the same
yeah,
thing. Yes.
today it's just money just happens to be the currency of influence. And so when we're trying to influence decisions that are being made, again, going back to being a driver, what is best for the driver is allowing them to earn on their time, right? Because we know it can work, right? Like I guess for me, the question would be, you know, what I guess I also from the beginning I said to be success, and I think you and I actually had this conversation offline. To be successful as a Uber driver, whether you're doing it part time or full time, you have to treat it like a business, right? You have to. Otherwise, it is a losing game. You can do it part time and still be a winning game, but you have to treat it like a business. If we look at how many businesses typically fail, most, right? So
Yep.
we're just looking at the dynamics of economies playing out in this microcosm of rideshare. Like there's so many businesses starting every day. Oh, I'm going to be an Uber driver, and I'm making $12 an hour. I'm still choosing to do it every day. I mean,
Agreed.
these are choices that are being made, right? And I think it's a hard pill to swallow, but the reality is like we have to. It works. It does. The solution isn't from where I sit isn't fixing the system per se for this because we could change this and we will still have those same people who are starting their businesses and failing because A, they don't have the drive, or B, they don't have the know-how. And that's B is probably the more important one. They don't know the dynamics of how do I handle this like a business. And if we address that part first, which is a completely different philosophical conversation,
Agreed.
we're going to be here, which again goes back to why your channel is here. Like
Exactly. And that's
it was,
the, yeah, I agree. Because, again, yeah, people, I'm well aware that we have a, that we have a very flawed system when it comes to outcomes for many people. Um,
sure.
but as you said, that is a thing that we, like, as people, have to work towards long term. The
Mm-hmm.
reality is, right now, yeah, the best that we can do is make sure that we understand, basic finances so that we're able to not get screwed as hard. Um,
Sure.
and that's the goal of this is
Yeah.
I know that like me giving financial information out is not going to fix whether or not a person is barely scraping by on minimum wage in Tribeca. Like I'm well aware of that. That is something that I have to do separately of, when it comes to like pushing for policies, like phone banking on things that I care about, things like that. But this is trying to handle that other part of how do we make this as available as possible, which I've said this a bunch of times is we need to be we need to put more of a focus on financial literacy and on understanding of basic statistics in
Mm-hmm.
school than we do
Mm-hmm.
because
I'm
like you said about understanding averages, like the fact that most Americans don't know the difference between like a median and
mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
normal mean average.
Average. Mm-hmm.
That's a big problem, especially the more data driven society becomes, the easier it
Mm-hmm.
is for us to be swayed.
Manipulated. Yep.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I'm gonna jump in for a second just because
Of
I think
course.
you're doing yourself a disservice a little bit by saying that you're not gonna change like this guy in Tribeca who's on minimum wage. by just talking about financial information. Remember, that guy in Tribeca who's working minimum wage, I would bet 99.9 infinity nines that he hasn't had many financial literacy conversations.
That is fair.
So this could start the conversation. You know what I mean? And I feel
And I
like we
hope
live
it
in a,
does. I hope
I
it
think
does.
I truly believe it does. Just looking at your comment section, like seeing people engage, like this is where we need to be. Like no matter what the topic is, like just engaging in conversation about things that we didn't know about, that we do know about, just the things that matter, man. Like having real open conversations and trying to better understand. Because saying I don't know can only last for so long. Again, everyone watching this, most likely the device you're on holds everything,
100%.
everything that you want to know,
100% agree.
right? So it's I feel like that is the root. Like if there, because what you're doing is really also, when I say retire, bringing this full circle, what you're doing is my goal,
Hell
and
yeah.
I applaud you for doing it. Like because I feel like the problem of how we're even in this financial system that we're in is hundreds of years ago, only a few people knew how money worked. Period. Now there's a few more, but the gap has gotten so wide during that time that trying to play catch up is it's a doozy. But we have everything we need sitting in your hand right now. Just close this app right now after you finish this video and just go do some financial literacy. Watch the rest of his channel, like because that's where we start to fix the problem. You know what I mean? Like I've listened
100%.
to many people talk about how to make changes in our society. And a lot of times people think, let's go attack these politics and these policies. It's like, wait a second, you can't have how. Great example. Uber is able to influence so much because they have the currency of influence. Go get the currency of influence, and then let's come attack these policies because we know how the game works right now. And little things like your channel, like the more of these that we have, the bigger of an effect we can have. Because once we change people's minds and we can think like, okay, I know how this works. That's how this game works. Really? If enough of us have that, that's how we can then go get the currency of influence and then come together because we kind of know what we're talking about now and then go make a change because we can influence the policymakers or we can become policymakers who have financial knowledge, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I guess I say all that to say, don't sell yourself short. Like this, you are doing it by doing this
Thank you.
because
I appreciate
it's
that.
forcing conversations. It's going to force conversations,
Which is
whether it's
the
between
goal.
us or others.
Which is the goal. Because I think too
Yeah.
often, especially, I think social media, I mean, I know a lot of people have like watched The Social Dilemma recently, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I've at least seen both people, whether you're on the like right political spectrum or the left political spectrum, I think all of us kind of understand the big negatives of the
Mm-hmm.
polarization of social media. Um,
Sure.
and yeah, we need to be able to have, that's the point. And like, as an example
Mm-hmm.
with Adam, and I'll do this on any video that I have. Like if there's a disagreement that someone has that is like, well thought out and good faith, not just, spewing some like,
Trolling.
yeah, not trolling or, which I will shut you
Yeah.
down if you troll, but it's,
Yeah.
if it's well thought out and we're going to have a conversation in good faith, that is the goal. That's what we all should do. And yeah, if we have time to be able to do it, because we've managed our life in a point where we're able to, or we're fortunate enough to, yeah, that's what we should do. And in the meantime, also work on those policy things long term. But yeah, like you said, when I was working at UPS as an example while going to school, I wanted to do a YouTube channel then, for other stuff, just to practice, learn new skills, things like that. And and then I couldn't have done this. I didn't have the time because, as you said, I didn't have the currency of influence to give me the time that I needed to be able to do this. Working 40 to 70 hours a week doing that, just couldn't, even if I wanted to.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
and so, yeah, but the point is I spent that time, in the grind essentially to get to a point where, okay, I've got enough in savings. I've got a good emergency fund. I've already been putting money in a 401k for years now. I'm I'm comfortable. Now I can kind of relax a little bit and focus more on things I want to do outside of that, which is this. So yeah, 100%, 100%. And Yeah, and I want, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad
Yeah.
because that is the goal. I want that. I want because I think it sucks that you have so many people that like, especially where I'm from. Lower income people tend to be lower income people in the South tend to lean more
Hmm.
towards like not just conservative politics but conservative ways of thinking. Period.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
that ends up meaning that a lot of people from that area, at least the ones that I know anecdotally, when they look for like financial stuff, content, they're looking more at like Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey is, in my opinion, not he doesn't give good advice for the average person because
Sure.
he's like constantly talking about, as an example, I grew up with the perspective of credit cards are bad and you shouldn't get them because you'll go into debt and your life will spiral out of control basically.
Hmm.
That is very stupid. And that is not like you said, understand the rules of the game.
Hmm.
Everything exists. There's positives and negatives of everything that exists. If
Hmm.
you understand whatever the specific system or game is well enough, you can take advantage of it. So like with credit cards, because we have such a consumer and credit based society, you have to have a good credit score. So, and I've got videos on that. Go check them out. But basically, you know, if I would have had just the information, because I graduated, I'm younger than you, but I graduated high school in 2011, so I was at that age where YouTube wasn't quite as popular as it wasn't quite there yet. So 3 years after that, though, there's so much with like Graham Stephan and others, in the finance sphere on YouTube, giving out information. It's like, man, I wish I had known this information earlier, because even though I was in a better position than a lot of people were, I still couldn't take advantage of it because I just didn't know. And that's the goal is of these types of channels, is to get that conversation started earlier, because we don't talk about this stuff. At least my parents didn't talk about this stuff with me. My parents were pretty good financially, and they definitely talked to me a lot about stuff. But I had to tell my dad to open a Roth IRA for my mom. So do a spouse IRA
Sure.
on top
Yeah.
of his 401k, because I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, you're paying so much more in taxes. There's no reason for you to be doing this. And he's 30 years older than me. Like, we all can
It's
learn from each other.
it's an amazing thing, and it goes back to like you don't know what you don't know, right? And again, originally in the system, the information was in a small group, right? Like there a limited amount of people had the information, so therefore a limited amount of people could capitalize on their information and knowledge. Because my parents, we're only a few years apart. We're still the same generation, right? And my parents, very similar. My father's passed away. My mom just retired, and like the financial conversations I had with her prior to now and now, I'm honored that she comes to me about them. But at the same time, it's like, but if the people who raised you didn't have money, or you didn't have access to people who understood how money and finances worked, where are you getting the information from? And
Yep.
then you're just passing down that information, you know, repeatedly, you know.
Yep.
So, and I think one of my favorite analogies is three gorillas in a cage. Sorry, but I just have to tell you about it.
Okay.
Three gorillas in a cage. You have them in a cage. There's bananas hanging in the middle. Every time the gorillas try to go get the banana, the trainer comes up and sprays them with the water hose. Every time, without fail. Take one gorilla out, put a new one in. Gorillas love bananas. New gorilla goes up, try to get the bananas. The two that were there before beat him up every time. Beat him up every time. Take another one out. So you now have two new gorillas and only one of the originals. That new gorilla tries to get bananas. Those two now beat him up every time. Take the last one out. So you now have three new gorillas. That brand new one goes after the bananas. Those two beat him up. They have no clue why they're beating him up. Zero. No one stopped to ask, like, why are we beating this guy up? We all like bananas. Like, why don't we wait till next time the trainer comes in here to clean up the mess? We beat him up, and all the bananas are out there.
Yeah, I
But no one
100% agree with
stops.
that.
No one stops. No one stops to ask, like, why are we doing this? What could we do better? You know, and things like this, and having conversations, asking just why are we doing this way? I think would take us a long way in resolving a lot of our ills of the world, if you will.
Amen. 100% agreed. And that's I really appreciate this conversation, and for that reason, and yeah, if I'll let you have the floor at the end, and let you can whatever you want to say. I'll let you have the
Man,
last word.
I appreciate you having me here. This conversation really has been inspirational for me, just because, as I told you, like for me, my I have many conversations like this in Uber. Like I've done near 10,000 rides, so I have conversations with people all the time, and just in my life, I'm having conversations with people on a daily. And I like to believe I'm a pretty, set goals and then go for them kind of thing. But in listening and having this conversation with you and seeing the awesome job that you're doing, I'm asking myself, why haven't you started? Like, what are you waiting on? You know what I mean? Like, start. So I appreciate this conversation for that. I appreciate it for what you're doing, because this is 10 years from now. Let's come back and watch this video, like, because I know you're going to be something monumentally more than this. And it's because this is needed, man. This is what we need right now in society. So I appreciate you for doing it, for having me on, and I hope, man, we stay in contact,
Oh hell
because
yeah,
I mean, there's not. I don't think we're special in more than like we're better than anyone else. However, I think we're special. So I think we should have some more conversations in real life, man.
hell yeah, definitely. And DM me on Instagram, and if you have any questions as far as like best practices as far as getting set up, because I put off starting making videos for years, and then I've learned enough that I'm competent, but it's always a learning process. And thank you so
For
much. I
sure.
really appreciate having you on. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. And yeah, be sure to subscribe. And yeah, put in the comments what you think. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this clip, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out the full live version of the Wealth for 99 podcast, where we talk finance, economics, and public policy from a working class perspective. We'll see you there.